Imagine hearing the words that destroy your life in less than 30 minutes. 8K. Scotty just watched everything he knew: loyalty, respect, his street code fall apart in a courtroom. All because someone he trusted snitched. The shocking betrayal didn't just break him, it shook an entire city. Families turned on each other, social media erupted, and Jacksonville's streets became a battlefield of revenge, music, and murder. This is the story of loyalty shattered, lives lost, and the brutal truth about what happens when the street code meets the law. And no one is truly untouchable. ATK Scotty just got hit with a crushing sentence that even broke his father down in tears. Hearing it felt like the air was gone, like you needed an oxygen tank just to breathe. The shocking part: Scotty snitched on his homie Ksoo, setting off a chain of events no one saw coming. On July 31, 2025, Jacksonville's streets turned upside down when the Duval County judge dropped the gavel. It was more than a case closing. It was the collapse of everything these young guys thought they knew about loyalty, respect, and the street code. ATK Scotty, real name Leroy Whitaker Jr., heard the words that would haunt him forever: guilty of first-degree murder. The jury only took 30 minutes to seal his fate. But the city wasn't just shook by the verdict, it was the way it unfolded. In the streets, the golden rule is no snitching. Yet when facing life behind bars, all that code disappeared. The prosecution brought a lineup of cooperating witnesses, led by Dominique Butterbarner, who had been present during Lil Buck's alleged shooting and detailed the plan in chilling detail. From the initial stakeout at McCormick's apartment, to the shopping center, naming Ksoo as the shooter. Butter's testimony alone was devastating, but the real shock came next. Ksoo's own father, Abdul Robinson Sr., got on the stand and testified against his son, confirming he helped the group escape after the shooting. Watching the dashcam footage in court, the room went silent as Robinson Sr. identified his own son as the shooter, literally handing over his son's life to save himself. The hood erupted online with disbelief, anger, and confusion. Abdul Sr., aged 51, was not just any figure, he was a key player in the ATK organization, tied to violent crimes and alleged murders. The defense tried to challenge the witnesses, questioning Barner's motives and pointing out the lack of DNA evidence. But facing a father backing the prosecution made the fight nearly impossible. Scotty's father was visibly shattered, struggling to breathe as he watched his son's life slip away, questioning the fairness of the jury and the speed of the deliberation. Ksoo broke down too, covering his face, shaking, and crying. A reminder that all the tough talk and rap bravado could not shield them from reality. Social media exploded with debates, as people discussed the betrayals, the snitching, and whether all this cooperation was necessary or just self-preservation. The streets realized the harsh truth: all that ride-or-die loyalty can vanish in an instant. When heavy charges and decades behind bars are on the line, that is when the truth hits hardest. You see who really has courage, who will stand by their word, and who will crumble under pressure. Facing the reality of spending a lifetime behind bars changes everything. Suddenly, those street bonds of loyalty, the codes that were supposed to hold people together, look fragile, almost meaningless. Prosecutors have repeatedly pointed out that nearly everyone involved in street life will eventually cooperate when the stakes are this high. The tough talk, the ride-or-die attitude, the loyalty pledges, it all starts to vanish when someone is staring down decades in a cage. When the courtroom doors closed and the shackles clicked, it became painfully clear that the so-called no snitching rule meant nothing in the face of self-preservation. People started looking out for themselves, and even family members weren't immune to that pressure. To fully understand why families were literally turning on one another in open court, we have to go back and trace the bloody chain that brought everything to this point: a series of events that set the stage for betrayal, heartbreak, and lives ending too soon. It all began on January 16, 2019, when Willie Addison, known in the streets as Boss Goon, was fatally shot outside Paradise Gentlemen's Club in Jacksonville. Addison was just 25 years old, freshly released from prison, and trying to carve out a better life through rap. He had served 6 years for burglary and perjury and was ready to start over, but the streets had other plans. Boss Goon was riding in a silver Chevy Tahoe with 5 other people, including Abdul Robinson Sr., the father of Ksoo. The shooting was executed in cold blood, turning a simple night out into a nightmare for everyone in that vehicle. The attack didn't just take a life, it left others wounded, including Robinson Sr., and sent shockwaves through the local community. Boss Goon was more than just another name on a crime report. He was Ksoo's blood brother, a young man trying to make something of himself through music. And his death set off a chain reaction that would engulf everyone in the surrounding streets. The murder of Boss Goon wasn't the end, it was the spark. In Jacksonville's drill rap scene, violence and music are closely intertwined. And when someone is killed, it doesn't stay private. It becomes content, propaganda, and a reason to retaliate. Soon after the shooting, Lil Buck released a diss track mocking Boss Goon's death, implying the involvement of KTA members. This act of disrespect was viewed as an admission of wrongdoing by some in the ATK camp and led to immediate retaliation. In these streets, disrespect doesn't go unanswered, and every death triggers another, creating a cycle of violence that escalates faster than anyone can contain it. Just weeks after Boss Goon's murder, on February 25, 2019, Adrian Gaynor Jr., known as Bide, a 16-year-old high school student and aspiring rapper affiliated with KTA, was shot dead at Hilltop Village Apartments. Bide was still in his school uniform, a kid who had barely begun to navigate life. And his death devastated friends, family, and the entire local scene. His close friend Julio Fulio, who was like a big brother to him, described the pain of their last conversation and the heartbreak of losing someone so young. These murders weren't random acts of street violence, they were calculated, personal, and designed to send a message. The culture of retaliation only intensified. Hockey Robinson, known as Ksoo, was eventually arrested in March 2020 and charged with first-degree murder in Bai's death. What made his alleged role even colder was the way he reportedly flaunted it online. Ksoo posted videos and messages mocking Bai's death, even releasing an album called Buyout with photos of deceased KTA members on the cover. Bai's parents, Adrian and Elizabeth Gaynor, expressed the devastation of seeing their child's murder turned into social media content, taunted and broadcast like entertainment. This pattern of killing and bragging became the hallmark of Jacksonville's drill scene. Young men weren't just taking lives. They were turning those deaths into music videos, Instagram posts, and a spectacle for followers. Every murder required payback, and every act of revenge spawned another, creating a chain of escalating violence that involved ATK, KTA, and 6-block crews. By the time Lil Buck was ambushed and shot in broad daylight at Dames Point Plaza on January 15, 2020, the body count was already out of control, and the streets had become a war zone. The evidence against ATK, Scotty, and Ksoo in Lil Buck's case was overwhelming. Dashcam and surveillance footage, forensic analysis, and witness statements all tied them to the scene. While post-murder social media posts celebrated the killing, showing a chilling lack of remorse. But beyond the courtroom evidence, what was even more striking was the cultural context. The feud between ATK and KTA wasn't just about territory or revenge. It was a generational war, fueled by drill rap, social media, and the desire for respect in a city where young black men were caught between street loyalty and survival. The conflict had been brewing for years, beginning with earlier murders and disputes and escalating into a cycle of retaliation that would consume entire neighborhoods. The music, the posts, and the videos weren't just entertainment. They were active documentation of a violent culture, glorifying death and normalizing it for a new generation. By the time the courtroom doors closed for ATK Scotty and Ksoo, the consequences of that culture were undeniable. Families were broken, young lives lost, and the ideals of loyalty and respect had been tested and found wanting. The streets had produced warriors, but they had also produced betrayal. In the end, the harsh reality was clear. When faced with life in prison, the codes of the streets collapse, the bravado disappears. And the truth, harsh as it may be, exposes who is really willing to stand by their word and who will do whatever it takes to survive. This is the world that began with Boss Goon's murder, escalated through Bai's death, and culminated in the courtroom drama that would forever change Jacksonville's streets and the young men caught in its cycle of violence. He was riding in a silver Chevy Tahoe with 5 others, including Ksoo's father, Abdul Robinson Sr., when the attack execution style left Boss Goon dead and wounded several others. This murder sparked outrage and retaliation. In the drill rap world, violence is amplified through music. And Lil Buck's diss track mocking Boss Goon's death pushed tensions even higher, signaling a TK that KTA might have been behind the killing. But this was only one link in a longer chain of violence. Just weeks later, on February 25, 2019, Adrian Gaynor Jr., known as Bai, a 16-year-old aspiring rapper and KTA affiliate, was shot at Hilltop Village Apartments. Bai was still in his school uniform, innocent and full of life, when his world was cut short, leaving friends like Julio Fulio devastated. His death reignited the cycle of revenge, making it clear that one killing led to another, and every funeral fueled further bloodshed. This chain of murders, music, and street retaliation created the storm that eventually landed ATK, Scotty, and Ksoo in orange jumpsuits, proving that in these streets, loyalty is fragile, betrayal is real, and the consequences of one violent act ripple through the lives of everyone involved. Word on the streets was that Ksoo was the one who pulled the trigger in Bai's death. Hockey Robinson, 23, known as Ksoo, and affiliated with ATK, was arrested in March 2020 and charged with first-degree murder. What made it worse was how he allegedly flaunted it afterward, posting videos and messages mocking Bai's death, even calling it Smoking Bai and dropping an album titled Buyout, showing pictures of dead KTA members on the cover. Bai's father, Adrian Gaynor Sr., spoke about the pain of seeing his son's death turned into a joke, while his mother, Elizabeth Gaynor, said the taunts forced their family to relive the trauma over and over. This pattern of murder followed by bragging became a hallmark of Jacksonville's drill scene, where killings were not just acts of violence but entertainment turned into music videos and social media posts. The violence kept escalating, every murder demanding revenge, creating a calculated, methodical cycle that involved ATK, KTA, and 6 Block, sparking online debates and speculations about the connections between killings. By the time Lil Buck was killed in January 2020, the body count was already overwhelming. On January 15, Lil Buck was ambushed and shot dead in broad daylight at Dames Point Plaza, a busy shopping center, showing how reckless and uncontrollable the situation had become. The investigation revealed careful planning, including nearby home invasions, disguises, escape routes, and backup plans. Evidence against ATK Scotty and Ksoo piled up. Dashcam and surveillance footage, witness testimony, and forensic analysis all tied them to the scene. Even more damaging were their post-murder Instagram posts celebrating the killing, showing not just a lack of remorse but active pride in their actions. But this murder was part of a much larger cultural shift, one that turned Jacksonville into a real-life war zone for young black men. The feud between ATK and KTA was not random. It was a decade-long battle, a personal and deadly conflict that transformed an entire generation into casualties and turned the city's hip-hop scene into a battlefield, where rap lyrics became death sentences and Instagram posts served as confessions. This war was not just about territory or drugs, it became a cultural phenomenon that blurred the lines between music, entertainment, and real-life violence, making grief viral and turning authentic pain into profit. The feud between ATK and KT began in the early 2010s as both gangs fought to establish control over Jacksonville's streets. ATK was the first to rise, with figures like Abdul Robinson Sr. and Youngin Ace taking leadership roles and presenting themselves as neighborhood protectors. Though their protection came hand in hand with violence, they enforced their dominance quickly and decisively, using aggression and intimidation to send a clear message to anyone who challenged them. KTA, short for Kill Them All, emerged shortly after as a direct response to ATK's growing influence, led by Julio Fulio and the 6 Block crew. KTA became known for its fierce recruitment tactics, rapid retaliation, and willingness to escalate conflicts at a moment's notice. What might have started as neighborhood rivalry soon spiraled into all-out warfare, with both sides constantly trying to outdo each other in displays of power and control. The feud reached a critical turning point on May 27, 2017, with the murder of Zion Brown, an 18-year-old cousin of Julio Fulio. Brown was targeted in a home invasion carried out by DeAndre Jack Thomas, an ATK affiliate closely linked to young Gene Ace. This killing was more than just another act of violence. It ignited a chain reaction that would escalate into years of retaliation, fear, and bloodshed. The streets of Jacksonville felt the immediate impact, as both sides began a systematic campaign of get-back attacks, each seeking to avenge fallen members. The murder of Brown marked the moment when the rivalry transformed from isolated incidents into a relentless cycle of vengeance that would engulf the city, claiming multiple lives and leaving a permanent scar on the community. From that point on, the feud was never just about street territory. Social media, drill rap, and public displays of disrespect amplified every murder. turning real-life violence into entertainment and further inflaming tensions. Each side released diss tracks that named victims and celebrated killings, turning songs and videos into tools of propaganda and intimidation. What began as a local conflict between two crews had grown into a cultural phenomenon, shaping a generation of young men who were caught between loyalty to their crews, the lure of street credibility, and the constant threat of violence. The feud between ATK and KTA was no longer just a series of fights, it had become a war, with lives, reputations, and entire neighborhoods hanging in the balance. That murder set off a relentless and brutal cycle of retaliation that would claim dozens of lives and cement Jacksonville's reputation as one of the most dangerous cities for young people caught up in rap and street conflicts. Each act of violence seemed to demand a response, creating an almost unbreakable chain of vengeance that swept through neighborhoods, schools, and social circles alike. The cycle escalated in intensity on June 5, 2018, when young Ksoo Bullard became the target of a devastating drive-by shooting. He was shot 8 times, barely surviving the brutal attack. While the violence claimed the lives of his brother, Trayvon Bullard, and close friends Royal Devon Smith Jr. and Jacob Dashad Groover, this attack did not simply leave grief in its wake. It ignited another wave of retaliation, with every faction within Jacksonville's streets compelled to respond, fueling the unending cycle of retribution. What made this feud exceptionally destructive was not only the acts of violence themselves, but also the role of social media and drill rap in amplifying the conflict. Videos, posts, and music tracks turned killings into public spectacles, broadcasting grief, anger, and bragging simultaneously to a wide audience. Diss tracks openly named victims, while social media posts mocked the deceased or celebrated attacks, inflaming tensions and making the violence both a personal vendetta and a cultural performance. The digital amplification ensured that acts of violence did not stay contained within rival groups, they became viral events, drawing attention from peers, fans, and even law enforcement. Drill rap, with its raw, unfiltered lyrics and aggressive storytelling, often documented real-life crimes, glorifying them in a way that blurred the line between music and evidence. Songs that referenced attacks, disrespected victims, or flaunted retaliation became rallying points for gangs, perpetuating a culture in which revenge and public recognition were inseparable. In this environment, every killing sparked speculation, fear, and anticipation of the next strike. The streets became a stage for a generational conflict in which young men navigated loyalty, reputation, and survival under constant threat. Neighborhoods that were once tight-knit were transformed into war zones, with parents, siblings, and friends caught between mourning losses and fearing the next escalation. The combination of real-life violence, social media amplification, and drill rap storytelling created a uniquely volatile climate, one in which the consequences of a single murder could ripple outward for years, claiming lives, destroying families, and perpetuating a cycle that seemed impossible to break. In Jacksonville, the streets had become a place where survival, notoriety, and revenge collided in deadly and unavoidable ways, leaving an indelible mark on a generation of young people navigating a world shaped by violence and digital exposure. Diss tracks directly named deceased rivals, turning music videos into propaganda and crime evidence. Young Gene Ace's Who I Smoke and Fulio's When I See You remix reached millions of views, escalating tensions while law enforcement tried to monitor posts like crime scenes. Social media glorified violence, making murder entertainment, and police compared it to gang graffiti of the 1980s, but much more public and inflamed. The human cost was devastating. Daily life disrupted, young lives lost, and neighborhoods living in fear. Community groups like Mad Dads tried to intervene, but the lure of street credibility and rap fame often outweighed safety concerns. Leaders like Julio Fulio, Charles Andrew Jones III became household names not for talent, but for involvement in violence, while ATK figures like Young Janace and Ksoo symbolized retaliation and street justice. Ksoo's music even boasted about killing by, showing how the feud's violence and bragging intertwined. Tragically, many victims were teenagers or young adults barely starting life, making the feud not just a battle for power but a generational tragedy that changed Jacksonville forever.